most phenomenal Chinese drama. So if you like Chinese TV dramas, you cannot miss this one. So chances are that you have heard of Empresses in the Palace, also known by its Chinese title, Zhen Huan Zhuan. So Legend of Zhen Huan. Zhen Huan is the lady's name. So this is not just another historical drama. In China, Zhen Huanzhuan is a cultural phenomenon. It first aired in 2011, but more than a decade later, people still quote its lines. You see the cuts on TikTok's Chinese version Douyin everywhere. And the AI also turned into some really weird cuts, but really funny. And people are still analyzing its politics and even use its dialogue in the daily life. So some viewers joked that they have watched the entire series more than 10 times. I'm not surprised, although it's an extremely long TV drama. So today I want to explain three things. First, how big Zhen Huanzhuan is in China. And second, what's the story about, especially what's the relationship to the real Qing dynasty history? And the last one is why it became so successful, and if you can watch it overseas for the full episodes. So first, let's talk about the scale and the impact. So Zhen Huanzhuan has a whopping 76 episodes. So each episode is about 45 minutes. So that's already make it a very big commitment for nowadays people. But its influence goes far beyond the episode count. So in China, this show is often compared to the Game of Thrones in terms of the cultural penetration, but without dragons, of course, or all these violences. So office workers watch it during lunch breaks, college students analyze the character arcs, and the middle-aged viewers discuss the palace politics as they were real workplace strategies, 办公室政治. So lines from the show has become internet slangs. Certain facial expressions or some eye movements and pauses are constantly reused in the memes. So even people who have never watched the show often recognize its characters. More importantly, the Zhen Huanzhuan also raised the standard of the historical dramas in mainland China. After it is aired, audience became much more critical of bad scripts, shallow characters, and inaccurate costumes, which are way more common today than before because there are so many copycats. So, secondly, is Zhen Huanzhuan a real history? So, Zhen Huanzhuan is not a documentary by any means, and it's not strict historical fiction as well. So it's what Chinese audience would call it's a 架空历史, which means a fictional history built on a real historical framework. That's kind of weird, right? So the story is set during the reign of the Yongzheng Emperor of the Qing dynasty historically. So Yongzheng is known for one very dramatic background event, the struggle among the emperor's sons for the throne, often summarized as the 九子夺嫡, the nine princes competing for one throne. So this power struggle is real history. But however, Zhen Huanzhuan focused not on the princess, but on what happens inside the imperial palace after Yongzheng won over the nine princes and becomes emperor. So the main character Zhen Huan is fictional but inspired by the historical consorts. She enters the palace as a young, intelligent, and relatively idealistic girl. At the beginning, she believes in love, and she did fall in love, and she believed in fairness, personal integrity, and blah blah. So what follows is a slow, brutal transformation, which is also the best part of the character's curve. So inside the palace, every concubine is competing, not just for the love, but also for survival. Favor from the emperor means power. Losing favor can mean isolation, humiliation, and even death. So Zhen Huan starts as someone who wants to stay out of the conflict, but the system does not allow that. So the betrayals, the false accusations, miscarriages, political alliances, and the psychological warfare gradually force her to change. So by the end of the series of the 78 episodes, Zhen Huan becomes one of the most powerful women in the empire, but at an enormous personal cost. So why this show is so successful? Well, there are several key reasons. First, the writing is extremely tight. Almost every line of the dialogue has a purpose. The characters rarely say exactly what they mean. Instead, they speak indirectly using the implication, politeness, and hidden traits, which we mentioned earlier why Chinese never say no directly. So this reflects real traditional Chinese court communication. And secondly, the characters are very complex. There are no pure good or evil characters, which make them more interesting to watch. So even the villains have understandable motivations. Many viewers find themselves sympathizing with the characters they initially hated so much. And third, the show reflects real society psychology. Although it's set in the imperial palace, many Chinese viewers see the modern parallels: workplace politics, favoritism, power struggles, and the cost of ambition. So the palace is essentially a metaphor of the society for today. And fourth, the production quality was exceptional for that time, for its time. The costumes, the makeup, the gestures, everything were carefully designed. Even how the characters walk, sit, and drink tea conveying status and power. So finally, I think the show does not rush. Character development happens slowly. Decisions have long-term consequences, and this makes rewatching extremely rewarding. Viewer always notice new details each time. And I forgot to mention that this show was based on already very popular online novel, so it does have a very solid writing part. So can you watch the full episode overseas? If you're outside of China, you may have noticed that Netflix has some show called Empress in the Palace, but there is a catch. The Netflix version is heavily edited. The original 76 episode were cut down to only 6 long episodes. So many subplots, character arcs, and the political struggles were removed. Well, the Netflix version gives you the general story, but it does not fully represent why the show is so beloved. And even worse, I don't think the Netflix version is available anymore on Netflix. So for the full version, overseas viewers, usually you can rely on the Chinese streaming platforms with international access. Maybe you need a VPN. And I don't know if YouTube has that. While I was searching, it was not there. Or you can have some fan subtitled versions of the Asian drama platforms. So the availability really depends on the region and licensing. And the English subtitles vary in quality for sure. So some are really excellent, some miss the cultural parts of that. But after all, it's not just a TV drama. It's a long, carefully constructed study of power, survival, and human nature, wrapped in the imperials of China. So if you only watch the condensed version, you may understand the plot. But to understand why Chinese audience are so crazy about that after 10 years later, you really need the full experience of the 76 episodes. So if you're willing to invest the time, it's one of the most rewarding Chinese dramas you can watch of the upcoming holiday seasons. Want to know more recommendations or cultures of China? Subscribe and follow for more. 再见。